Hello everyone. If I was going to Ascent Boston, this is the deck that I'll be taking. Let's go ahead and do a deep dive into it and see if it's going to be good after this weekend. Alrighty, so we're going to take a quick look at this Tristan deck, which I would be taking to Boston if I were to go. I feel like this deck is very well positioned in the current meta. I'm super curious to see how the meta breakdown for Boston actually goes coming up this weekend. Hopefully this video does go up before Friday or at least Saturday morning, just so I could have gotten these claims in before the actual event. But without further ado, we'll quickly go over it here. So we do have our material deck, which is just Tristan 1, 2, and then we just go to Shadow Dancer in this. I feel like having Reaver is going to be a little bit too slow, and I don't include that in the sideboard. You just really want to hit Shadow Dancer consistently. Of course, we're going to be running the Assassin's Ripper for the Slice and Dice early kills, 15 damage, against decks that get a little bit too greedy, or players who are not really expecting the explosive nature of Wind Tristan. Followed by good old back charger for a card advantage, and we can put this power cell to use in multiple ways in our main deck. Censer of Restful Peace is just going to be a mainstay of this meta. It is so good against Ryle decks and certain fire decks that you just want to make sure you have this to shut off the floating memory. It doesn't really affect you that much, just because the only real floating memory you run in this variant is going to be Reclaim and Ensnaring Fumes, and Wind's specialty is all about cycling cards and digging through the deck. So if you end up having to materialize your champion from memory, it's not that big of a deal. You will be maintaining card advantage very efficiently. Grand Crusader's Ring, the classic. I prefer this over the Grill in this certain sort of style. I know some people use the Cloak with the Grill, but I just feel like Grand Crusader's Ring offers a little bit more consistency in that guaranteed card. And then we do have main board Safeguard Amulet. There are a lot of stray decks that do spell damage, so I think putting this main board is going to be really effective, really help you stop against suited with Straight Flare, Fire Merlin, Ryle, variants like Xander, CL, things like that. Just allows you to just have that main board protection, plus it can boost up your win percentage for that game 1. Next is going to be Terrafring. Once again, just wanting to stop some of these ally variant decks. They are going to be a lot there, especially with Suited being so popular as it is. Boots for preparation, counter generation, and card draw late game. And then your tried and true weapon, the Shadow's Claw. There's a lot of Reduce to Ash going to be around here, so you have to actually be smart about bringing out your Shadow's Claw. It's probably not going to be something you just bring out turn 3 every time you get to Tristan Shadow Dancer. You probably want to use it a little bit more effectively, and it's just something to consider against these fire decks. Now, jumping into main board, the list is going to be decently similar to the World Championship list, because I feel like that list was super solid. There are just going to be a little bit of unique twists and flares from my personal playstyle and what I think would be best in the meta. We have 3 Dungeon Guides, 4 Incaps, 4 Sadies, 3 Slice and Dice, and you know it, our 61st card is going to be that Turbocharge. It's a high roll if we hit it, and if we don't, it's alright, does not matter here. We are down to 2 Ace and Protectors to help bounce our 2-cost allies in Windblessed Lookout, Windmill Engineer, and a newly included ally Eternal Magistrate, which we'll get to. This is going to be our first tech card, Cleansing Reunion. It is just devastating to do this against decks that end of turn Ryle or Creative Shock, who are planning on using that beneficial discard to level up here. If you are able to keep this up, even if it's not imbued, early game you can stop these decks and make them go down in influence, and it is a very good way. Wind's all about generating value, so you can actually turn 1 Windmill Engineer and then keep Cleansing Reunion up just in case as well. Then we're up to 4 Ensnaring Fumes. I feel like we just want to make sure we can stop some of these Suzaku decks, some of these ally decks, and then it unfortunately doesn't do what you want against the Spectre package, but it is still a great way to save yourself if needed, return your own allies for some value, and it does have floating memory. Eternal Magistrate is a spicy automaton. This is the second way we can take advantage of our power cell by buffing this, and this is a great card against decks that want to DG to 3 as fast as possible. It really prevents them. It has to have an answer to remove Eternal Magistrate. And even better is if you could catch them off guard with this next card, Expeditious Opening. I have been playing this deck at locals and just testing it, and it is so fun to see someone go Dungeon Guide to 3, and I go Expeditious Opening, imbue Eternal Magistrate. Now I've just wasted your Dungeon Guide turn. Such a great feeling. Doesn't always go into effect. You do have to keep 6 cards for this kind of style. It's not every time that you will have that open. And even if you just draw this in your opening hand, it's a great card to cycle. It's a 2-cost to draw a card into memory. It cycles itself. It sets you up for leveling up if needed. And it has a lot of cool benefits, even if you don't just get the fast activation ally, which it pairs well with like Windblast Lookout and Windmill Engineer if you are going along that style. Fey Whispers, Reclaim, and Stifling Traps, Surveil the Winds, Veiling Breezes. That's the classic Wind Tristan package. Nothing is changing about that, and that is all staying in the deck. We do have our Windblast Lookout and Windmill Engineer as 2 of our most impactful 2-cost allies. You really want to see these every time because they are so good. Lets you dig further in the deck. Now we are running 3 Shadow Strikes because this card is so good, and even if you're not prepping for a lot, as you notice my list is not running Mastermind Schemes, I feel like a lot of decks should be cutting this card right now. It is a little bit too slow. It does give you agility if you do have 8 more prep counters, but you really want to be doing more with your turn than just doubling your prep counters and passing turn. So I feel like with that in mind, Shadow Striking for even like 4 or 5 prep is still really good and a great way to close out the game. And to pair along with that is going to be Spirel the Schwartz Queen. This card has been crazy good in my opinion, especially if you can develop one as Tristan 3. You have the protection with the Ominous Shadows, and now this is pretty much a second in-cap that you have on board that deals damage, helps you close out those games, and I just really love the fact that this card is able to just put pressure on your opponent, and they have to play around it. Most of the time, I'm throwing a 2 or a 3 underneath Spirel from this deck, just to try and stop some of the big cards that I'm worried about. And it works every time, because like even if you don't get the negate, the part of the cost is to just reveal, and then she re-enters and you get beyond enter, so you're just dealing damage. You don't actually have to negate something, and that's why she is so strong in this deck, and I love playing her, that kind of like style. And it's another just body that your opponent is going to have to deal with, otherwise she's going to deal 6, 9, 12 damage, and that's going to be what wins the game. When we go over to our sideboard, we do have the Blinding Orb, and I'm a big fan of this card just because it is good when you're going for those kill turns, especially against water decks, and it's a great way to prevent your opponents from actually interacting with you. And so doesn't make the main material deck, but on the sideboard it does have that options. Additionally, it just offers you that card draw to help filter in a little bit more. We then have 3 Blanche the Sheltering Saints. I'm not a fan of playing against Merlin, so this is mostly there to stop Merlin decks and that Luxem Xander that may be around. Then we have one of Ace and Protector to go in against sort of suited and ally decks. A little bigger body, helps remove Arthurs, red hairs, things of that nature. It's always good to get an additional one. We have our 4th Cleansing Reunion in the sideboard when you really want to mess up Fire or Ryle decks. 3 Dream Fairies against the allies, 2 Innervate Agilities against allies, and or Rise, Xanders, things if you do want to be able to get that protection. And then 2 of Regal Inquisition. We bring this against any level 3 deck because we're going to discard their key pieces and force them to have to redraw into them, which will give us perfect information if we do go for Shadow Strike or what we keep up with Spirel, things of that nature. Card's super good. I don't think it's good in every matchup though, so that's why it's hit up in that sideboard. So now, since we've seen the whole deck, next we're going to be looking at how I would sideboard into specific matchups if I was taking this list 1-for-1 to Boston. The first sideboard we're going to be taking a look at is against Riles. I would be taking out my 1 of Turbocharge, putting in that 4th Cleansing Reunion. We take out 1 Ensnaring Fume for a Stifling Trap, as Ensnaring Fume is just not that good against the Spectres. You don't want to give them double benefit of Liminal Guide once they become ephemeral. So we're going to take that out, and the world's list only did run 2 ensnaring fumes, so going from my 4 down to 2 is not going to be a bad deal here. That brings in that stifling trap, which is going to be so good against dungeon guides and a couple of other allies there that you do want to stop the on enter. And speaking of ensnaring fumes, that second one that I was saying is coming out, and we are putting in a Regal Inquisition. And then additionally with that, I'm going to be taking out 1 Spirel. I'm a little iffy on this one here. I needed to find 1 more spot for the second Regal Inquisition, and there was a lot of cards I didn't want to go down on, so I'm thinking late game I'd rather draw a Regal Inquisition than a Spirel against the Ryle decks themselves, so that's why you're going to see this here. And so this would be my perfect sideboard against Ryle decks. Of course, there's a little, like, depending on the Ryle deck, I would change just 1, maybe 2 ideas, but in general, this is what I would be looking to do. Next, we're going to be looking at our suited decks, how I would sideboard here. First of all, we're going to take 1 Cleansing Reunion out for an Ascent Protector. Yes, suited can use the grave to get out the queen, things of that nature, but cleansing just isn't going to be it. I'd rather have commitment to the board and protection in Ascent Protector. And then we're going to go ahead and take out 2 Expeditious Openings. I don't need to have combat tricks for my opponent because they're going to be the aggressor. I need to be defensive. So we're going to have Innervate and Agilities in instead over that, both of them, for that stealth, for that being able to recover, and even Spell Shroud will be beneficial because they have straight flare. Then we're going to take that last Expeditious Opening and put in your favorite fairy, the Dream Fairy, and 3 of those are coming in, so that 1 Expeditious Opening and that 2 last Cleansing Reunions will be out of there in favor for, once again, an ally, board control, and hopefully be able to help stabilize yourself just a little bit better. And this is just technically not for suited. I listed it as suited because it's one of the bigger decks that I think will be there. This is also just a really good plan against aggro decks in general. Personally, I think like if you're running against Fire Lorraine, Fire aggro allies, Wind allies, this is probably what I would do nonetheless. But suited probably will be my biggest matchup there. Now, I do want to just cover some of the flex cards and testing these. These are the 4 main different cards that I'm running in my main board, opposed to a lot of other Tristan lists. And personally, testing them has felt fine. It's been fun. It's been great. There have been some clunky moments with like Expeditious Opening where I want to keep that up to be able to like surprise my opponent with like an Eternal Magistrate, or throwing in, you know, something at the end of turn like a Windbless Lookout or a Windmill Engineer. It just sometimes makes me play a little bit suboptimally. All about learning here. I do think, depending on if I performed well at this event with Expeditious Opening, I would consider keeping it, but if it just felt like a dead card 99% of the time during the 8-round Ascent, then I would immediately cut it and replace it with something a little bit better. But I do really just like the fact that it filters and gives you benefit on top of that. Now, Cleansing Reunion is a very specific main deck meta choice. I don't think this card will be played normally unless we are in the specific Ryle discard meta. Water's not that prevalent right now, and, you know, this card can just shut down water a lot. You know, sometimes Nico decks can get past this, but Cleansing Reunion mostly just for the Ryle decks and being able to stop that really explosive Liminal Guide float discard turn 1 from a Ryle the Abyss. Now, Spirel the Schwartz Queen, notoriously Tristan runs as their other Umbra card, Penumbral Waltz. I personally have leaned towards a little bit more aggressive. I feel like I don't want to rely constantly on Slice and Dice and Shadow Strike, so this is a cool way that both lets me deal damage and play control. In my times of testing it, I've activated it 3 times at locals, and all 3 times I felt super strong, and it has been like, I was happy I was able to play that card. There has not been a time yet, personally, where I've run into an issue where it doesn't feel like it does anything. I think this card will always do something, and it will always be good, and I'm looking forward to testing more with it. And then finally, Eternal Magistrate. I feel like this is the biggest one on the chopping block. It is mostly geared to stop level 3 decks, and especially in Soul Lorraine as well. But the problem is, if they've already ensouled, it does not stop the second ensoul, and it just feels somewhat weak against every other matchup. And so I'm really relying on having to fight against level 3 decks, which you're not always guaranteed to at an Ascent. And there's a lot of aggro decks going around, like aggro Daochan, Fire Suzaku, you have Suited, you have a bunch of other cards that Eternal Magistrate can easily be cut main deck in favor of other better cards against aggro, and then you could even lean these in sideboard if you really are concerned about level 3s, or just cut them entirely. But that is just sort of my thoughts about the deck I would take into Ascent Boston, and a little insight on every little piece of it as well. Thank you everyone for watching, hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful time playing.